Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to my program Real Talk. I'm your host Iqbal Bana. Today we've been talking about safeguarding issues, and although we've been primarily talking about safeguarding when it comes to young children, safeguarding also has automatically implications for people who are vulnerable adults as well. But that is a very different subject area. Primarily with my guest Samshuddin Ahmed, I've been talking about safeguarding issues when it comes to children in settings where they are in education or in recreation or sporting activities, etc. So if you're running cricketing, footballing, boxing clubs, etc., the issue of safeguarding applies equally as much to you as it does to schools and madrasas, etc., and mosques as well. So this is something that I don't think a lot of people understand, particularly those who are at the front end of delivering these services. So if you are an imam, an ustad in a mosque and a madrasa, do you really know what your responsibility is when it comes to safeguarding issues? Do you understand the legal implications of what it is for you as an individual? And does the institution that you work within also realize what could happen to them? Now, before we went for the break, Shamsuddin Saab sort of gave an example of a maktab where a child had reported something, and they probably sort of, as he used the term during the break, buried their head in their sands to say, this has got nothing to do with this, it happened outside the madrasa. Coming back, that is a serious issue, isn't it? Mosque and madrasas, as you say, you have a collective responsibility, all organizations that child is in touch with, whether it's in the school or the mosque or a madrasa or a cricket club or a football club or a boxing club. Everyone has the responsibility of looking out for those signals and those signs. And if they neglect it, right, or pass it on to somebody else, saying it's got nothing to do with us, what are the implications for those organizations when they don't report the neglect that they should have picked up, but they haven't?
One of the things that I say when I deliver my training is that, God forbid, but if something goes wrong in safeguarding, the worst case scenario is that you will read about a child being dead the next day. And the fact that it potentially happened under your watch when you could have potentially done something about it is something you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. But that's not where it all stops. When something, when serious case reviews happen, they've got different terminologies for now, but one of the things that most of us will have heard of when cases like this hit the news media, we always hear about some reviews taking place. They have a very strict purpose behind that. A, to determine what happened. B, to determine why I'm oversimplifying it, to determine why did it happen. Then to look at who are actually involved. Then to look at who could have done what, when, how, and where. And they will actually, so essentially, again, goes back to that same example that I use all the time. There's the child. You've got all these other entities around the child. Every single one of it is a chain. And the review's going to find out where the weakest link was. And it's going to come after that link. And it will come in two forms. A, it will come after the institution itself. And it will also potentially look at individuals as well. So there is I'm speaking from experience, this idea of burying our head in the sand. I do make it clear that that's not the general case at all, but I have seen enough to actually raise sort of concern in my own head, that hence I said earlier on there's a lot of room for improvement, because we will have this kind of issues that will happen, because we have a very evolving society where people are exposed to a lot more things. Equally, we have a society where people can be accused of false allegations, as have happened, and those things tend to destroy people's lives. We had one of those cases. Once again, here it was in Bradford that ruined somebody's life, but subsequently it transpired that it was actually a false allegation. But you know what? By then the damage is done.
Too late.
The damage is done to that particular individual livelihood. The livelihood is one aspect,
Reputational damage.
The reputational damage is, how do you quantify that? When somebody's entire life is destroyed on the back of a false allegation. So it's a very, very important, very sort of serious dynamic to reconcile. If you know, there is the issue about making sure that the child is protected, but also making sure that staff are protected as well. You know, safeguarding has two dimensions. Though, as an organization, I need to make sure that my members of staff are also protected. Well, how are they going to be protected? Coming up with heavy armor every single day? It doesn't work like that. That's not the environment we're in. You know, have we got, I said it many, many times, have we got systems and policies and procedures and training in place so that these people are actually equipped to deal with this thing? But on that, I think it's very important to also recognize something. We've talked about the institutions all this time. I think it's also time to put the mirror in front of the community itself as well. As a community, what are we doing? And this is, again, this is my personal experience of doing this for some period of time now. A typical member of staff will hop into my organization at 4:45, 4:50 in the evening, having taken, I don't know what kind of traffic jam they've gone through, but probably happens to be the third job of the day for that particular individual. Because in order to make ends meet, they're actually having to do all those other extra jobs. Now, if we are serious about our education, our children's future, which inevitably means that we provide a good education for them, we need to be serious about investing something. Okay? The idea that I'm paying, I don't know, typical what, 12, 15 pound a week for my child to attend 10 hours of tuition at institution X, that averages what, about £1 something per hour per child? Well, in the same family, I'm just being hypothetical, in the same family we've got either cousins, relatives or siblings who are doing GCSE private tuition, and that starts at £25 an hour. That straight away tells me where I am placing my emphasis.
Well, I mean, yeah, that is a well-known factor, that, you know, we don't invest as much in religious education or gaining religious education in our community. We say we are good Muslims, we say we want our children to become, you know, excellent Muslims and role models, but when it comes to actually investing in them, in their education, I know the Maulanas who've been on my program, like Maulana Fazal Dad, Maulana Hayat, have also made comments to this effect as well. So yeah, I totally agree with you.
And faith aside, Iqbal Bhai, faith aside, we need to invest in them in the way that I've sort of talked about it, so that they become productive members of the society, a society that benefits from these people. Because like I said earlier on, we talk about them being children today, but they are the future adults.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
They are the future communities. So what is it that we are actually investing in them, and therefore what do we expect in return?
I mean, that's a whole different subject area that we know, I've explored in the past with others, ulemas as well. But yeah, it is a huge area. I think, you know, our expectations from our children is that, you know, they all automatically, naturally will become good role models, good Muslims, etc., without necessarily sort of indoctrinating them in the real Islamic values and principles and laws and Sharias, you know, how they have to behave and how to grow up. And they, you know, I remember Hafiz Sahib Patel used to say to me that, you know, maa baap aate hain bachon ko leke, because they can't control them at home. They bring them to to Markaz and say, isko abhi tum rakho, isko Hafiz banao, Maulana banao. Child has already got some behavioral issues, and because they can't deal with it, they expect us to be able to deal with it and to nurture him and to grow him. And mashallah, quite a lot do, but some don't. And this is some of the issues that, you know, so parents need to be sort of mindful of as well. But I mean, coming back, I mean, what I want to really talk about now is the institutions have got a huge responsibility, as you said.
Yeah, big
right?
one.
Do you feel that our mosque committees have a handle on this to the extent that they should?
A lot of them don't, quite simply. And
Right.
again, I'm going by my own experience. So, you know, I feel I'm entitled to make that remark.
Well, you're the professional.
I will not generalize, because it's not well. We suffer enough from generalizations, so I'm not going to do that. But my experience is, you know, there is still this idea that inshallah everything will be fine. I don't think that's going to be the case. We have to proactively take control because the landscape is changing. When a child displays a particular type of behavior, there could be two reasons behind it, essentially. A, because it's a cry for help. Or B, that something has happened and it is just the way they are. That's just the way they're going to display their emotion on a particular situation. But most of the time, it's actually a cry for help, irrespective of how negative the behavior might be. So that makes it even more challenging. That how do we actually get to the bottom of it? Okay, this is where specialist organizations come in. An education establishment, whether it's through the statutory sector or the supplementary sector, it doesn't matter. Teachers are not trained social workers. Teachers are not trained therapists. Teachers are not trained.
Coming on that particular point, I mean, obviously parents may have a mindset of how they grew up, and the expectation is that they want the children to grow up in the same sort of environment, structure, format. And as you say, the world is changing. Now, do you think there's a conflict there where parents expect their child to behave and sort of practice their culture, their faith in a way that they had done it, while not recognizing that the world has changed?
Yeah.
And
I think there's a huge battle going on between the elements of the different, primarily the two different cultures that our children are exposed to. That is then compounded even further by the religious expectations. Because a lot of the cultural stuff that we kind of propagate, they don't actually have no basis within our deen, and yet we try to legitimize it as being is part of our deen, and we can actually have loads of examples, fairly sensitive in cases, so I'm not going to go into that at the moment. So we actually conflate the two, that it is part of our culture. I don't think we are going to cross that bridge soon enough where we can have a medium, and the reason for that is very simple. Young people are growing rapidly. The landscape is changing rapidly. The old people are getting older quickly and still trying to retain whatever it is that they had. I'm not for a moment suggesting that we part company with what they had, we embraced it. There isn't that. That's not the issue. The issue is what kind of tarbiyat, if I can use the word, is going on within the house. Because at the end of the day, the notion is, let's take out students who are in boarding facilities. For example, just for a moment, we have children that go to school. Well, it could be one of our independent, faith-orientated schools, but still follows the national curriculum, or it could be a sort of typical mainstream education. The issue there is quite simple. Out of 24 hours that we have in a day, that institution's actually got my child for 6 hours.
Yes.
I've actually got my child for 18 hours. So in terms of nurturing, in terms of conditioning, in terms of tarbiyat, who's actually doing it more? And as you said, I go to places where people say, we're just nothing but childcare facilities for 2 hours a day in respect of number of children.
So the main responsibility obviously has to be with the parents, isn't it? I mean, as Samshuddin says, you have the child for the majority of the day. The majority of the time, yours is your child. You are looking after them. You brought them into this world, and you are the one who's responsible for making sure that, as you're using the word, that the tarbiyat is right for them. And sometimes I think tarbiyat and faith, so sometimes people make that into a conflict. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Samshuddin bhai, thank you very much for a very interesting and elaborate sort of awareness-raising session with me and my viewers. This is a serious issue, I think, that we need to be grappling with. We know that there's all sorts of issues taking place. I haven't even touched on child sexual abuse issues that has been prominent in across our communities for a long time. Inshallah, one day, we might come back to that. I hope you found today's episode show interesting. I hope it's taught you and me, it certainly taught me a lot of issues that I need to be aware of, or more aware of now. I hope our institutional organizations, if you're watching, you realize the responsibility that's placed upon you. I hope that all this sort of the talk that Samshuddin has given has empowered you as well, So inshallah, I'll see you next week when we'll be back. In the meantime, may Allah be with you. Maybe you'll be safeguarded. Make dua for me, Samshuddin Bhai, and everybody else here at Iqra TV. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.